I have been married twice, which of course was not part of the plan. But what I've learned is that I didn't search for that lifelong partnership with the right mindset. Growing up in an unstable childhood, love didn't feel safe. So in this conversation, I'm sharing what I had to do to unlearn that and to believe that love, real love, actually was possible. Welcome back to the channel, y'all. I am so excited about this today. I have a feeling that this interview with this expert is going to reveal a lot of things that I'm going to actively be able to use in my life in current day. Today, I have with me my friend, my new friend, Shonda, who I've met in a coaching mastermind that I'm in, and she's an expert on all things dating and love, which, as I've been writing my memoir and I've been reflecting so much on my childhood, I realize how much my childhood has given me or not given me the things that I have needed. And what's really interesting is a lot of you know, if you've watched my channel before, that I was married actually before I met John. And I really think that in my dating life after my childhood and just like in my growing up, I had no idea what I was looking for. And that first marriage was picked out of, I don't know how, but it definitely wasn't right for me. So I want to dive into a lot of those things today. Shonda, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody who you are, what you do, how you came to this place with this information and this specialty.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here with you. I actually, just side note, didn't even know that you were married before John. So this is
Yes.
going to be really exciting to dive into because I'm going to be getting a lot of this information for the first time too and really exploring it with you. As you said, I'm a dating and relationship coach. I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, which means that I work within the subconscious mind when I'm working with clients and helping them in their love life and their relationships. And I'm also in the process of becoming a licensed therapist as well. So I just really love this work and I just, want to soak it up as much as I can. And my story and my journey to present day is that I was the woman who, very much like a Carrie Bradshaw, Sex in the City. I was living in New York City. I was in my late 30s. And I had had these really toxic relationships. And for a while in my 20s and early 30s, it was kind of fun and exciting and being out and dating and the possibility and the excitement of it. But as I got to about my mid 30s, I started to notice that all my friends were meeting their husbands and they were settling down. And I was a bridesmaid like 3 times in a 3-month period one summer. And, all the while I'm going to these weddings, party of one, because I'm not in a relationship. And I started to feel like, oh my God, I want this. I really want love. I want to get married. I want to find my person, but I keep dating a different version of the same guy over and over again. And so he was a classically toxic, emotionally unavailable, sometimes narcissistic man who would kind of come on really strong and love bomb me, but then would like suddenly not be ready or would start to like fade into the background and stop responding and just really send me into these anxiety spirals. And I used to call myself like the almost girlfriend because I couldn't get into a relationship for like a 4-year period. And, I was just really heartbroken. And so it was through my journey because I woke up one day, I was 36 years old, and I'll never forget this. I was walking with one of my best friends alongside the West Side Highway, and I was crying to her because this had just happened again. It was like 2 months that I was investing in a guy who was giving me all the signs that we were headed towards a relationship. And then he just kind of out of nowhere was like, this isn't working. I was like, what do you mean this isn't working? Like, you just took me to the Hamptons a week ago. Like, I thought we were, simpatico, right? And I was crying to her and I was like, I think maybe I just need to accept that like this isn't going to happen for me. Like, I'm probably not going to find anybody at this point, and I now know that that's because I was just seeking so much certainty because there was so much fear about that. And I went home that night. I cried myself to sleep. I stopped at the bodega. I got some Ben and Jerry's, right? I like did that thing that I always did in that cycle. And I woke up the next day and I just remember having this thought of like, okay, you can either accept this and let this be your reality, or you can do everything that you have within your power to decide that this is not going to be your story. And it was really that decision that sent me on my journey. And I ended up hiring a hypnotherapist and a coach at the time, like a life coach. And I was afraid. I was really afraid to spend that money. But I just remember having the thought, if you don't spend this money, if you don't at least try, then nothing will be worth it. Like holding on to that money isn't going to be worth it. And by the way, what if it helps you make more money? That was kind of the thought I had, was like, why don't you just try this? And I was willing to try anything. And, you know, fast forward, long story short, I did this really deep work on my subconscious mind with both of those two practitioners. And 5 months later, I met my husband.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is, but it isn't, because I've seen it replicated now time and again.
Yeah. Well, but I think the thing that feels crazy, and probably a lot of audience people watching and listening, they're going to be like, what? You went through this for years and years and years, and then in 5 months it's solved, like the change of that. So tell me this, like the thing that you said basically that changed it was you started working in your subconscious mind. And I feel like when we think about dating, when we think about love, when we think about all of that, we think about actions, love languages, giving gifts, quality time, saying nice words, being together, like staring into each other's eyes. And so I guess just tell me a little bit about why you're thinking about your thoughts, your subconscious self, and why and how you could trust it not being those other actions, I guess, even to just begin this conversation.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really valid, because I find that women who are in the dating world, by the way, you're so inundated with the tips, the tricks.
Yes.
That's what I mean. The text messages.
Stand like this.
Say this to make him
say this.
Ask you out again. I had tried all of that. That did not get me anywhere except for more anxious. You know, I was the girl who would I would have my phone and I would be like, am I going to hear back from this guy? I sent a text. It's been 24 hours. It's been 48 hours. I'm just going to shut my phone off and go to bed. I'm not even going to have my phone available to look at, because I was so anxious and I didn't want to I was so on edge, waiting for that text message. Those external cues don't get you far. Maybe they might buy you a little bit more time, but they're not going to get you very far if you're dealing with somebody who's not available for love. And what I found when I did this subconscious work, and this was kind of the key to the unlock of it all for me, was that, oh, wait, I keep attracting men who are classically emotionally unavailable, afraid to take it to the next step. I'm attracting these types of men because I'm emotionally unavailable.
I was literally, when you said that, I wrote down the question, but what if you are the person that's emotionally unavailable? So, okay, continue.
Essentially, as I was doing that work, what I started to realize was that I had such a deep fear of commitment and being available, because I thought that it meant that I would be hurt on a very, very, very deep level. And this all kind of goes back to what you opened with, which is, in my own childhood, I had these deep insecure attachments. I had these deep abandonment wounds, and they were really driving everything forward. You know, when we talk about the subconscious is created between the ages of 2-3 years old till about 7 or 8, if we're being generous. So those really formative years, as you're a child, you're basically pure subconscious. You're living in the plane of imagination. You're soaking up the world around you, and you're playing, and you're just open. You're like a sponge. And part of that is biological for your survival, because you're creating your worldview. You're watching the people around you. You're watching your parents. You're listening when they say to you, don't play at the dinner table. And in that instant, you're instantly creating a belief that is I have to be perfect. I have to act perfect in order to attain my Father's love. Right? And so that's kind of happening everywhere you go. It's happening at school. It's happening with your grandparents. It's happening at Target, right? So I have a toddler. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So when I take my toddler to Target And he starts melting down because I'm like, we're not going to buy a toy today, honey. And he throws himself on the ground and starts throwing a tantrum. As a mother, my natural inclination, I'm sure we've all seen it in a store, is like, get up off the ground. You can't throw a tantrum here. Come on, we got to go. We're in public. In that moment, now I know because I'm a practitioner of this work, he's creating a belief that is like, I can't fully express. I can't let my natural expression come to a completion here. I have to bottle it up. I have to bottle my feelings up, right? So we're creating those beliefs. And so it goes back to my childhood, but essentially I did this really deep dive within my subconscious and started to understand for the very first time that I was the common denominator, that I was the one who's deeply afraid of love, and that my subconscious therefore felt only safe with people who it knew. It was like not letting me see, I had the blinders on, it wasn't letting me see all of the signs of these people's emotional availability, because it was like, well, this person isn't available, so you can't really get hurt because you get to stay in control, because then you know what to expect.
That's so interesting. I have so many thoughts and so many questions. I do, when you were describing the child in the store, it also reminded me so much about what I did as an educator. So I was also a teacher before. I don't even know if you know that, for 10 years. And I remember one of the things that I felt like set me apart so much and why kids enjoyed being in my classroom is because so often my reaction was very different, where I was like, oh, well, why don't you just tell me what's going on? Or let's work with this. Or like my reaction was just very different to the quote unquote bad kids or doing something wrong. And kids were always so surprised at first. Like, what is she talking about? Why are we even? Because it was so different than most adult interactions. And I just always called that like building life skills, because to me, it just feels logical to not react, to like help them through it and help them understand what's going on in a different way and help them process their feelings. But I think that's so powerful when you think about even those moments really create and depict not just generally who we are, not just who we are when we're at the grocery store, but like that moment changes who we are, like you're saying, even in your love life down the way. And I think that's really powerful to hear, both when we think about ourselves. You know, sometimes you journal, not sometimes, a lot of times you journal when things are hard and you get really mean to yourself. And one of the big things that I always say is like, I'm unlovable. I'm unlovable. And it was always something I did wrong. And I'm not necessarily saying my parents did anything wrong. I do believe they did the best that they could with what they had, which wasn't a lot. And they were in their own fight or flight. They had their own reasons to raise me or not raise me the way that they did. So I'm not like placing blame anywhere, but what it does is alleviates it off myself and kind of says, this is the human experience. This isn't like, because in those times of like thought and journaling about my love life, I would villainize myself so much. And hearing you say that is like, actually, no, this is like a natural reaction to your life. That feels like really nice permission, I think. So one of the things that I always had this idea of, and I'm starting to feel like maybe this idea is wrong, that I was thinking about as you were describing that, is when I think about my childhood growing up, I was not given a lot of love. My father was physically abusive. My mom was an alcoholic and wasn't really there. They were divorced. I spent most of the time with my mom. She worked multiple jobs. I started taking care of myself and like making my own meals when I was like 8. So in this time, my parents split up when I was 5. Living with my abusive dad was all my time up and before that, and then during summers. And so when you're talking about, when I was teaching, I always called it like the Jell-O mold. Like that's when your Jell-O is still wiggly and then it sets. And that shit's in there, right? And so you just kind of reminded me of what was all going on in that time. And that's when my parents split. That's when they had like a very unfriendly divorce. And I was like the moderator between my siblings for all of that. So I was really knees deep, eyeballs deep in that situation. But I remember when I went to decide to like choose my husband, I don't think I didn't like have desires about a relationship really. And so in a way, I feel the exact opposite of your story, because I was not like wanting a partner ever. And so I don't remember it being like this desire, but I do remember thinking, oh, in order to survive in the world, like one, this is just what you do. You date someone, you marry them, you make babies with them. And I remember when I'd met my ex, largely the reason why I chose him was just stability. I was like, I remember his family was, and it's crazy to think about it now, but like this is what my level of money thoughts were back then. I remember his mom had $200 in cash and my mind was blown. I was like, you're going to spend that to day
Yeah.
and on me. Like, and I was like, oh my God, wait, these people can take care of me. And they took me on my first like trip to Seattle from like the Portland area. And I just remember my mind was blown that I went somewhere. I went out of the country for the first time to them, actually to Mexico. But so I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like, does that feel like that lines up? Does that feel like you wouldn't have guessed that? I don't know. Because that's been my assumption the whole time, is because I didn't have security. I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Yeah. So when I hear that, my mind immediately goes to, oh, you were just in a survival vortex, right? You were in the survival vortex, which is, we talk about this in somatic work, which, somatic means soma, which means body. Right. And so I work largely with the subconscious mind and the body, because your subconscious kind of lives in the body. And what that reminds me of is, okay, so here's a person you're operating from your mind, and probably, I would be curious of your thoughts on this, but probably not really even attuned to your body and what your body was experiencing, what it felt like to be in your body, what it felt like to be around these people. And so essentially your subconscious program has taken over, which your subconscious mind, like the most important thing that you can know about it is that its only job is to keep you safe. And that is why I always tell my clients, like, it will choose a familiar hell if it thinks that that's going to create safety over unfamiliarity any day, because that always feels scary. It's not the status quo. And it feels like a threat to your survival. So, when you're just in this place where you're like, I'm on the track, I'm on the path, I'm supposed to get married, I'm supposed to date, I'm going to have babies. And by the way, this one seems like a really viable partner because they've got security and stability. It's like, we're just in survival vortex. We're not in our body. We're not regulated, right? We're not like consciously thinking thoughts about, what do I want? Right? Because that doesn't even occur to you when you're in a survival vortex of, I have lived my life through these insane challenges, right? Like, and I just want to validate that for you. That's very difficult. That's trauma, right? Capital T, little t doesn't matter. The definition of trauma is too much, too soon, too fast, or too little for too long. Sounds like you had both of those, right? And so just understanding that your biology was wired in such a way that it was, I have to operate from this survival vortex because I'm trying to find safety. And so that's what we're focused on.
I think that is so interesting to hear. And one of the things that as I've gone to write my book that I've really realized is like that survival vortex has been the large majority of my life. And I don't think I realized it because it basically started from being born. But like when I can like remember stuff, like I kind of attribute it to like my 5 or 6 when my parents started to split up type of years. And then really until I left that husband, I don't like, that was the first time when I left my ex that I ever asked myself what I wanted, like ever in my entire life, like truly. Like there were things where like I did really want to be a teacher. I did really want to go to college. I loved school. I loved reading books, like things like that. But like kind of what you were saying, that deep idea of like, or even started to wonder how it felt in my body. And I can mark like that time, it was mid-December 2013, where I had started going to therapy, and my therapist was like she was the first person that told me kind of what you said, like, you grew up in trauma. And I was like, what? And it was like, I'd already even been teaching kids like me and understanding them without realizing why and how that relationship grew so well with them. And I remember that was the first time I started saying, what do I want? And that's what made me realize that I was unhappy in my marriage, only because it wasn't that my marriage was unhappy, because I remember saying, he doesn't beat me, it's fine. But it was more that my marriage was neutral. And I realized it wasn't making me happy. It was just existence. And so that was the first time I ever asked that. So it's really interesting that you said that, because I'd never really made that definition of saying this was the first time I got what I want. And then you pointing out how you feel physically in your body. I remember feeling physically different in my body when I left him. And it's not that he was the issue. It was obviously my ability to feel myself. Yeah. But I always think about that era of my life. So moving into that year that I turned 27, it was also the year I met John, but like it was such a different year of my life because I felt so different. So I don't, I'm just having this huge aha of you saying that.
Well, I'm curious as you're talking. So, what did it feel like in your body? And if you can recall when you met your husband?
It was, I think that era of my life felt more like, I mean, fun is a very shallow word, but there was like this allowance of exploration, this allowance of, and I don't mean freedom in the sense of like divorce, separation, but like actual, where do I want to go? I was trying different places to go eat and do all of these different things. And it was like this really big time of discovery. And I will also say, meeting my now husband couldn't have been a more different experience than being with my past husband. And first meeting him was fun, light. There was that desire in that passionate way of just like wanting to be around him and feeling. I remember this statement saying that I felt like, and it's so interesting talking to you now how meaningful this statement said, that I was like, I have figured out life myself and you just make my life better and are extra. Versus now that I'm thinking about it, my ex-husband was like, oh, you are the guy who's supposed to keep me safe and do all of these things and like be the pillar of security or something. So there was like not this dependence on him either. I saw him as something that added to my life. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a big part of the process too, right? It's like the subconscious work is a huge part because you got to get in there and understand, how am I the common denominator? What are the subconscious fears and beliefs that are really driving my behavior forward in terms of my choices? But then there's like the next step after that, which is, okay, what am I doing to better myself, to feel happy and fulfilled and excited about my life, so that a person coming into my life can just be this like cherry on top of the sundae. They're not the whole sundae, right? And that's often when we're operating from a state of dysregulation, or we're in that survival vortex, which is exactly where I was. I was looking to a relationship to be the thing that solved everything in my life, that made me feel good, that made me feel worthy, whole, complete, satisfied, happy. But that's never going to work long term.
So many things that just went into my mind. So would you say, and like, I want this to be like the most raw, blunt, everything. So like, say whatever, don't worry if it like were to hurt my feelings or something like this, because I have like some curiosities. Would you say that there are different people who, because of their backgrounds, have a more difficult time in dating? Like you kind of said, like big T, little t trauma. And I almost feel like both of our experiences, we were both in that vortex, but we had different reasons why.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
I was gonna point that out to you, which is, your story is actually very unique. Like, we can obviously see why you made the choices that you made. However, I say that it's unique because I would say more often than not, when you grow up in an environment like the one that you grew up in, those people are choosing partners who are going to give them the sense of familiarity of what they've already experienced, whether that's verbal abuse, physical abuse, neglect, right? I say a lot of times, people who grow up insecurely attached, which is really just another way of saying, like, are your needs met by your primary caregivers when you're growing up? When you're a baby, like, think about it. I've had two babies. I know you don't have any, but you've been around babies, so you understand when a baby is crying, your primary job as the caretaker is, and the baby's dysregulated. That's what it's experiencing. It's experiencing dysregulation, and it's letting you know that it's dysregulated. You go to the baby, you pick it up, you give it physical touch. You say, here, baby, what do you need? Oh my gosh, is your diaper dirty? Do you need some food? Do you need some milk? Like, what do you need, baby? And then the baby can regulate itself, or it doesn't regulate itself, but it can regulate with your presence. And that creates a secure attachment, right? Which is, I feel secure because I'm secure in knowing that my needs are going to be met. And so when you grow up in an environment where your needs are not met as a young person, as a child, up until those like 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, that's creating an insecure attachment. Now, what often happens is, when those women go out and they turn 18, 20, 25, 35, and they're in the dating world, they don't know that. They just know that they have symptomology, which is, I feel really anxious, but I keep choosing partners who create anxiety in me for whatever reason. Right. And so that's kind of like the best case scenario. The worst case is we're choosing partners who are abusive. Right. And so, and I can speak to that because I did have a very, I won't say that he was physically abusive, but he was very mentally and emotionally abusive. I had a partner who was very emotionally abusive, and I had a very hard time pulling myself out of that relationship because it was so familiar to me.
Well, that's so interesting because I see that in my mom. So my mom had a husband before my dad, and I have older siblings from that relationship of hers. But my dad was physically abusive. The boyfriend that she picked after that was the same, and they would kind of like go in and out of their relationship. And so my mom, until I was probably like 15, 17-ish, basically was always choosing abusive, verbally, physically men to be in her life. And so I see kind of what you're saying, where it's like she would leave and like try to decide it was bad, but she would always be attracted to that. And that makes so much sense because I remember very specifically when I was a teen, and after we had moved back she broke up with her boyfriend for a short amount of time before they got back together, and she dated somebody else. And my sister and I were just like, this guy is so nice. He came and picked us up and took us out for hamburgers. And what's really interesting, and I'm going to want your feedback on this, is my sister didn't like that he was so nice. I did. And my sister and my mom didn't want him. My mom was like, I can't. He just like wants too much from me. She would just find a reason to not be with him. My sister was like, yeah, it's creepy that he wanted to take us all to hamburgers. I was like, what a great guy. No one else buys us hamburgers. Hamburgers are a treat. Like, this is amazing. And so I can now see, because of that story, also the pattern in my sister. Already, she was a year and a half older than me, but maybe learning those same things, kind of like you're saying, and being like, no, that feels unfamiliar. To have someone treat us kindly.
Yeah. And it feels unsafe. Right.
Yeah. So if you had to wage a guess, how the hell did my brain do that?
Well, I'm curious what your other resources were. So when I say resource, what I speak to is like, did you have teachers? Did you have mentors? Did you have friends? Did you have parents of friends, that kind of like gave you the resource of safety or support at all in your life?
That like makes me feel emotional, just you asking that question, because I think that retrospectively, like looking back when you ask that, and I can see like at an age point how different my decisions were than like my sister's, it makes me realize how pivotal people were when I maybe didn't think they were. And so, excuse me.
Yeah.
But, and I'm not like, this is not sadness. This is like deep gratitude. Deep gratitude. And I immediately think of my first grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson. Phenomenal. The best. She really supported me in, and I think she's a reason why I wanted to be a teacher, but very much supported me in just any desire I had. Like I remember I'm almost 38. I'll be 38 next month. I'm 37 and 11, 12. So this was a while back before computers were in first grade classrooms, but she had me like typing up my own books and was like publishing my stories as a kid. And I was the only kid in the class. And so she was really paying attention to me and giving that to me. And I just feel so like, I always felt thankful for that, but it feels really meaningful in this way right now. And then I will say, when I got to high school, we were never really able to do sports as kids because we couldn't afford it. But in high school, I was able to join dance team because it was like the one sport that I could earn money. They had a program where I could earn money for it to cover my costs. And so by that, I did make friends who I started hanging out with, and I did get to see their parents like treat each other and be around. So yeah. Would you say that was it then?
And I think that that's a huge component, because essentially what your nervous system was receiving in those moments was the message like, I'm worthy of this time and this love and this care and this attention and this championing, and I'm really special to receive this, and I'm worth this effort to learn these skills, right? My stories are important. Like, I'm important, I matter. And you were able to kind of like regulate that message, even if it wasn't the loudest message at every period of time in your life. That did get planted within your subconscious and your nervous system somewhere. And so that is a huge gift, I can relate to that a lot, just on a personal level. I also had, my parents got divorced when I was very young. My mother I actually don't speak to her anymore. We're estranged. She has a lot of mental illness, and she was my primary person, but it was very tumultuous growing up. There was a lot of trauma in my house, and I had a lot of teachers in my life that really championed me in the same way. And school was like my favorite place to go. And like, I was in this like performing arts program, and and I developed confidence in these areas. So that really served me. And I'll never forget, years later when I was living in New York City, I was working in corporate. I worked in human resources for a while, and I had been invited to my boss's house. He was like the CEO of the company, on the weekend, to just like hang out with his family. And I kind of would always find myself in these situations where I was sort of like, we'll call it the teacher's pet, even though that might have like a negative connotation. But I'll never forget, my mother said to me at one point when I was still talking to her, you always have been this way. And she said it in a very negative way. Like, you've always been the one who had to be like sitting on the teacher's lap. And years later, I understood through my own work in therapy that was a huge strength of mine, because my nervous system was seeking out people that it knew could create safety for me, that could help me, that could champion me, that could help me create confidence in myself, that could help support me, that could help me get to the next level. And I attribute a lot of my success in my personal life. It might not have worked out so well in the relationship department, but in my personal life, my motivation, my drive, my confidence in myself to be able to like move to New York and follow my dreams and all of that, it really came from those relationships. So, for you, the same.
Yeah, that's so powerful to think about. And it's really powerful what you just mentioned too about, those things also show up in different factors or factions of our life and become apparent different places too, because there's some places where I'm like, I excelled so well there, and why did I fumble there? And it's like they maybe just like didn't translate over. One of the things that also makes me think of is just really how important exposure isn't the right word, but people who grow up in these spaces and these things, it's like, and one of the reasons, and you probably don't know this, this isn't like super big knowledge, but people who have watched like my vlogs and things and are also tuning into this will sound familiar. So when I'm writing my memoir, one of the things that I really want to do is, when I think about myself reading books as a kid, it felt so good to see myself mirrored somewhere. But there's so few stories that can touch on this. And I'm not writing it in like the traditional nonfiction way. I'm writing it in fantasy. It's like a dystopian fantasy, because I also think what like 12-year-old girl wants to pick up a book that's going to like make her sob every night and like live through trauma, but to kind of mirror herself. And so my plan is that my memoir will really, even though right now I'm focusing on the young adult duology, it's going to be, because my favorite thing about Harry Potter, like as a book, is that it grows with the reader. So starting at like age 11, if you're 11 years old, you're reading the book, you see things you would say, things that you would do, decisions you would make. And then it grows, like words and stuff that makes sense to you. As it goes up, it literally grows in complexity, grows in like dialogue, grows in what a 17-year-old would make at the end. And so I'm going to start writing my actual memoir will span from board books, picture books that are appropriate for a 5-year-old, all the way up through the end of this duology. I'm just starting at the end because it's the most complex thing. But this conversation is so beneficial for that, because this helps me know the types of things to put in there to teach the kids. Like, because I also knew as a teacher's pet, but I don't think I realized, obviously until this moment, I was so overcome with gratitude, how vital that was. And so when I'm writing those early picture books, those are the things I get to show, is like that relationship with other people when I didn't have one at home, and how I still built one at school or things like that. And that way kids, when they read that, they're like, oh, I feel like that. I can do this. And then it can help them see that, but also give them those things. So thank you so much. That just like blew my mind in that and opened my eyes. That was really, really awesome.
Yeah. And I think it is so vitally important because our subconscious, you know, just speaking to that, when we're kids, you know, we're in that really malleable, open state. We're absorbing everything. We're creating our belief system and our worldview. We learn through story. We still do that as adults. Our subconscious learns through story. So to be able to tell stories, and this may even be a part of your journey in terms of like, I was just an avid reader and I was like soaking up all of this information. And so you are really like flooding your subconscious with example and story of like, this is how it could be, or this is what a relationship could look like, or this is what a healthy family is, right? So giving that to your subconscious from a young age can make a huge difference.
That's actually so powerful, because one of the things people ask me all the time, like, how did you get out? Because like you said, even like by how I grew up, that was one of the things the therapist told me. She's like, you should be on like your third baby from like a third different baby daddy, probably on heroin, about to get evicted from your house. And I was like, oh, okay. And so people ask me all the time, how did you get out from that? And it's really interesting. I was an avid reader. I read every book on my mom's bookshelf, and then went through every book I could in my classroom, every book in the library, like as much as I could. And I don't think I've given books enough credit. I mean, I love books. They're everywhere. But I don't think I've given them enough credit because one of the things after reading like a Tony Robbins book last year that I realized is there's abundant beliefs, there's limiting beliefs. But I just had like a neutral belief that I didn't like believe, oh, like I wasn't aware of like, I'm so deserving, I can have this, life is out there for me. And I wasn't like, oh, I can't have this because this is my life. But I was like, I don't like this. I've seen other stuff. I'm going to see what happens. Like there was like this very neutral, I wasn't being pulled forward by desire, and I wasn't being pushed forward by like desire of a way. I was just like neutrally like, that's not for me. So here I go. And so that makes sense then that the books were there too. So that's really interesting. I love that you asked that. Like, what were your other resources outside of that, and how much the people around us matter? And I think that this is really powerful then, because it really makes me think about, and I'm going to just go out on a limb and say this for everybody watching, this really makes me want to urge people to consider how they're treating people around them. And I think about this when I watch the movie The Pursuit of Happiness. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
And I think all the time about many scenes touch me, but like the scene where Will Smith like probably went to go chase down one of like the machines, and he's doing the internship. He's already in there. He's like wearing his one suit, and he gets hit by a car and one of his shoes falls off, and he goes back inside and he's wearing his suit or whatever, and he's like trying to walk like normal, whatever, and he's missing one shoe. And some of the guys start to like make fun of him. And I'm just like, you literally, if they knew what was going on in his life, nobody would have taken a jab at him. Nobody would have. If they were like, yeah, you can't make rent, you have a son you're responsible for, and like you literally slept in a bathroom last night, you're like washing your suit at like here, like trying to, you know, doing all of those things, just got hit by a car, like, and I just feel like we don't know what goes on in any child's home. We don't know what goes on in any, but even an adult relationship, right? That could still be creating those traumas. But what we can control is to always offer kindness, and to always be like that resource, that image of possibility for anybody. And like so often people just love to shit on each other on social media, wherever, just, you know, living in New York, down the street, on the subway. And it's like, or you could just be so conscious and aware of being possibility and happiness, because there could be someone who like, if you think about me, if my teacher didn't choose that, if my teacher didn't choose to be kind to me and to champion me, I would not be here right now. I'd probably be 3 different baby daddies on heroin. But
well, it's also probably a huge part of your path to becoming a teacher, because you saw that modeled for yourself, right? That was the thing that gave you that bit of worthiness and self-esteem, belief in your self-confidence. And I'm sure that that played out in your subconscious of like, I want to be able to do that for other people. I can make a difference.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then being a coach later, like I am now. Okay. So obviously though, I'm totally not healed. there's still things that linger in my brain. Like I said, this was going on all the way up until I met my current husband, who taught me literally what love was. In my mind, and I'm not saying he's the only person who's ever tried to love me, but it was the first time I felt that love, aside of like teachers and stuff, that now that's why I was feeling that gratitude. I'm like, wait, that was so much love. And I did feel that before, but I like mislabeled it as like, this is what a teacher does, right? But I just remember very specifically that John was the first person to be like, oh, I love you. Or he'd use the term making love. And I literally laughed at him. And he was like, why are you laughing at me? And I was like, no, we have sex. What are you talking about? And he's like, no, this is like special. I care about you. And I was like, okay, like all awkward and uncomfortable. So he was the first person who made me feel that way on many different levels. And yet I do still think one of the things that lingers is trust is hard. And you mentioned earlier that idea of abandonment. And it's like, no matter how good I feel and how safe I feel, it still can pop up. So I don't know, talk about that. Like, you've worked with people, you've gotten them to the point where they like find the love of their life. Yeah. What happens then? Like, is it just like, cool, everything you experienced, you're, oh, good job.
Well, there's a lot of work that we have to do to get your subconscious on board with receiving the love, feeling worthy of the love, and being available and open to love, right? That's kind of like the first step. But there's always, it is interesting because you are always in a journey. And I'm even thinking about myself and the work that I continue to do on myself in my long-term marriage now around noticing. Even it's like peeling an onion, right? You're always peeling back the layers of the onion. And so I even am going through periods of time now. Recently, I was talking on TikTok about this, where I'm starting to realize like the deeper areas, like the more nuanced areas where I experience dysregulation in my body, where I am uncomfortable with, for example, my husband being upset or being a little bit shut down because he's having a bad day, right? And the discomfort that creates in me and the automatic response to try to fix it or try to get him to be okay, because my subconscious and my nervous system are experiencing that as, oh no, like he's going away, there's going to be rupture here, and I don't have safety in my subconscious of knowing that there will be repair because I didn't experience that as a child. And so that's something, for example, that I'm now working through. But like, there's always going to be new level, new devil. There's always going to be opportunities. And this is really what I frame this as with my clients and in my own life. It's like, these are opportunities to create more intimacy and more safety. Rupture is a part of every relationship, and if you're a person who grew up with an anxious attachment, you're going to still experience it, but you're going to have tools to navigate it. You're going to have tools to recognize that, oh, this is my anxious attachment. This has nothing to do with this person. Because if we've done the work to create a nervous system and a subconscious that feels worthy of that healthy relationship and available to it, then at least we know we're choosing a partner who is available, who's there, right? So like for example, and I'm sure you feel this way about John, my husband he's willing to do the work. He's willing to have any messy conversation. He's willing to hear anything from me. He puts up with all of my crazy when it comes up. And I'm like, I can't handle this. Like, I'm having like a nervous breakdown because you're upset about something else and it has, to do with work. And like, he will always meet me there. Right. And so at least, you've done the work to choose like the right partner, but then there's deeper layers of work to do to continue to hold yourself through that, because it's deeply painful when that stuff's coming up.
And I think that's one of the things too, like people ask me all the time, like, how did you meet John? Because after I left my ex, I was like, I'm going to be Samantha Jones from Sex and the City. I was like, that was my plan. And then John like strolled into my life and I was like, oh, maybe my plan is changing.
Which
really
we can talk
better.
about that too, because that is a big piece of it, of like, what is the energy that you're in when you're like out into the world, and when you are so unattached to finding a relationship, that is literally when it happens.
That's what I've seen over and over. And that's what I tell everybody. I was like, this is what worked for us. Don't look for anyone.
Yeah, it's true.
But what was I going to say? Oh, they're just like, how did you know he was the one, blah, blah, blah. And I always say that I just felt like that we would just always grow together. Like that. And to me, I'm like, if you can have that in a relationship, and of course you're the expert, I'm like, that's what you need.
Well, and there was a sense of safety, right?
Yeah.
Whether you were conscious of it or not.
Which I wasn't. Yeah.
Right, but there's always a sense of safety of like there's something in your nervous system that feels at ease or settled usually with that person versus that like I'm just constantly anxious, but maybe I feel excited because it feels like chemistry, right? And this
Yeah.
person's not
Yeah.
available. That's a very different thing than being like, "Oh, I feel settled and at ease with this person." I felt that
Yeah.
way when I met my husband and you know, without going into the weeds of the story, we were introduced by two friends. They were visiting New York. My like two gay best friends that live in LA, they were in New York, and Brian, my husband, had lived in New York for a long time as well, but we had never met. And they invited us both to dinner, and we were just like, I was like, oh, this guy will be a good friend. Wasn't thinking anything of it. And then he invited me to coffee because we worked near each other. But at that coffee, we were having this it turned into a 3-hour conversation. And I was sitting there, I was like, oh, he's my husband. Like, this is my person, right? It was just like, but there was such a ease and calm to it. It wasn't anxious in my body. It just was like, oh, this makes sense now. And I always tell people, if I had met him 6 months earlier, I would have been like, he's too nice. He's too boring. He's too available. He likes me too much. Because I had that patterning. That was like my whole thing, right? Because I wanted to there was something deep in me that was like after the unavailable guy, right? I was seeking that. It was really familiar, but it felt safe to my nervous system. So you know that somebody's the one when they put you at ease.
Yeah. Wow. And I feel like people always ask, because John and I have always said, well, when you know, we just knew. And so I think that that's like a really good way to kind of put that. That's so awesome. Hi, Editing Kayla here. In this part of the interview, Shonda, being a licensed hypnotherapist, actually hypnotized me, but it made this interview really, really long. So I have cut out that part of the hypnosis that happened right here. And if you are interested in seeing that, you can enter your email at the link below. I'll put it in the description box, and then I'll just send the video right to you. But otherwise, this video was like an hour and a half long, which I felt like was just too long. So if you want to watch me get hypnotized for my very first time, you could do that by clicking the link below. Okay, so to then kind of like close out what we talked about before, when we think about people who, and here's something that, and I know we're kind of like over time, so I hope you're okay. Yeah. But here's one thing that I have found in my own journey, and it used to piss me off a lot, and I'm going to be like super blunt about that, is that I have experienced capital T, big T trauma in my life. And like you said, there's two different types. You've had both. And it used to make me feel really frustrated when people would say, oh, I have the same problem as you. And they experienced like not what I experienced. It used to make me feel not validated. So if people who are watching this ever felt that way, I know that I know other people who've also felt that way, who've been through things like me. And I don't know if you personally have, but one thing that I have found so interesting in my journey though, is that like you said, regardless of big T, little t, it's our perspective, and somebody else's little, like what I would consider a little t for somebody else could feel like a big T to somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about anybody who comes to you with trauma and they're thinking about finding love, and I want to always kind of give that as I'm doing these interviews and talking about these things in my life, because I do think that that was a really important awareness for me to get over, is like the perspective of everybody's feeling is everybody's feeling regardless of what the thing was, and it's all valid. But what would be your like tips, advice, or things to say to somebody if they feel like dating is hard, love is hard, the perspective of a relationship is hard because they are aware, feel wounded, like they feel like they hurt? Is there something that you would say, try this, work on this, this is your first step?
Yeah. So I think your very first step, first of all, what I would say is like, you have to look for evidence, because your brain, as you know this, and I'm sure you teach this, your brain is working on evidence, and it's always looking to the evidence of your past relationships and your past hurts and the past dating experiences to tell you what is possible for yourself. So you've got to pick your head up, like stop looking at the gum on your shoe, pick your head up and look at the world around you for evidence that it is possible at 38, and that it is possible at 40, that it's possible at any age, that it's possible even when you've been through all of the trauma, right? And so you can use me as an example, like you can use Kayla, you can use anybody in your life, you can use celebrities. Start looking for examples because we want to flood your subconscious with a different story. But your first step then is to also just start getting clear on what is my pattern? What are the things that I've experienced over and over again? Because once we can identify the pattern, then we're going to start to get clues on like, there's a reason why this keeps happening. And it's not because all the men suck. It's not because there's no good men in my area. It's not because of the dating apps. Those are all just very, your location, a dating app, those are all neutral. The reason why that's happening is because there's like a hook in your subconscious that wants to latch on to an experience like that. And I don't say that to blame you. I know that can be hard. Not everyone's ready for that message. I was ready because I was like, somebody tell me what to do, right? I'm ready. That can be a hard thing to hear. I'm not blaming anybody, but what I am saying is that that's actually really good news, because if you can start to identify the pattern and you can start to ask yourself, what's going on in my subconscious that wants this experience? Where am I lacking safety in what I want? Right? That's going to help you start to change it.
I love that. So see possibility everywhere. I like this advice for anything, not just love and relationships.
Yeah.
Look for possibility. We do such a good job on dwelling on all the bullshit. Like, look to the possibility, and then create that awareness of self, which, you have to have in order to move on. And I, like you, I celebrate that all the time in my clients when we create awareness for other things. I'm like, perfect. I'm so glad you have this, because this means we can work through it. If we didn't have this awareness, we would just be stuck here feeling this way. So it's such a powerful thing to feel that shittiness like you described. It's kind of hard to do, but yay. Yeah. I am so thankful for you taking this time to like come and be part of this interview and talk about these things that are hard, and doing it with such like grace and poise and care for obviously me and the people listening. So thank you so much. When you knew that you were coming on, is there anything that we didn't really get to say that you would love to tell people before we close out?
No, I think we did it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'll put where everybody can reach you and everything in the description box below. There's ample space and you'll be in there. But I am so thankful for you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you. I feel the same.